Hey everyone, Zoraz here from Not Casuals, today bringing you a guide on the HYDRA Behemoth in Call of Dragon, more specifically the Elite Raid version of this HYDRA boss, which is much harder than the normal version as for most behemoths. When doing the Elite version, you get extra rewards as well as a special server first frame if you complete it within 6 minutes and 30 seconds. Now, the Elite version of the HYDRA has very similar abilities as the regular one, but as you can see, they all have much higher damage factor, which means you have a lot less room to mess anything up, otherwise you will get killed quite quickly. Now, some of the specificity for this boss is that, of course, it has incredibly high amount of HP attack and defense, as well as enemy range units deal 20% less damage, meaning that melee units, such as cavalry, are much better in terms of doing damage on this boss if you have strong players with cav marches. As well, he will spawn some poison rains all around the map periodically throughout the fight, and lastly, he has Agony Blast, which is an ability that he casts in both versions, but in this version, he heals himself for 2% of his HP every time someone dies from it, which means it's very important to avoid. Now, as is the case for most behemoth fights, he is immune to debuffs and impairments effects, which means that many abilities from other heroes, such as Guanwin's Awaken, for example, do not work on him, as you cannot apply a dot or a debuff to him. Also, as we just talked about, Agony Blast is his main ability that you have to watch out for. Every 20 seconds, the HYDRA deals magic damage to all Legion, equal to 1% of their maximum HP, and this is increased by 1% for every stack of poison you have. So if you have 5, 6, 7 stack of poison, every 20 seconds, you're going to take 5, 6, 7 of your entire march dead instantly. This is exactly what will wipe a raid if you're not careful, because in the Elite version there is a lot of abilities that apply a poison effect. So when you start this fight, you only really need one tank in front of him to absorb the damage that he does, as well as everybody else kind of DPSing around him. The first thing he's going to do is spawn DPS stones. These you must pick up, otherwise your whole party gets one stack of poison. Also, he will periodically cast these huge wave of AoE in front of him. You must at all costs avoid this, including the tank. Now, for most of phase 1, this is how it's going to be. He's going to keep spawning these mana stones, and you try and have the DPS that have the best DPS pick them up to do as much damage as possible, because 25% buff is pretty big and it does stack. So if you have very big DPS picking more than one up, they will do a lot of damage, but they also are applying one stack of poison to themselves every time they pick it up, so it can't always be the same players. You can tell who has the buff for 25% damage by having a red circle underneath their characters when they're moving around. And in this phase, really the only focus is to pick them up before they expire and do as much damage as possible. Now, the next phase will have the HYDRA go into the corner and push everybody back. And then, as you can see here, he will spawn a dozen fissures on the ground. They're all going to be brown until someone stands in them. And every single one of them must be stood in, because otherwise it will explode and inflict a lot of damage and poison stack on the entire group. It is very important that during this phase you do not remove yourself from the fissure if you are the player that is standing on it. There is going to be also a lot of green lines of damage. As you can see, these kind of green fire lines that are going through the map. Of course, if you're staying on a fissure, you can't avoid them, and that is fine, but everybody else should avoid them as much as possible because they do a lot of damage and apply poison. The next phase will have 2 healing stones, green runes, spawn on the ground. These are very important. They need 10 players each, but everyone should stand in them because it will remove all of your poison debuff as well as heal you for a lot of healing, which will make you much stronger and do much more DPS. And as always, he will keep spawning these DPS stones throughout the fight, which will also be cleansed by the healing, by the way. So you would like to try and wait until you have healed yourself before picking one up. Otherwise, the rest of the next phase is going to be pretty similar. Once the fissures are closed, you just go back to DPSing and gathering the unstable mana stones, the DPS stones, whenever possible. Of course, most players should gather the ones near them. It's not worth moving around a lot to go gather them because you're losing out on DPS like tremendously if you're trying to move too much and try and go and get the stone at the other end of the map, for example. So once again, we are going to get knocked back by the boss and many more fissures are going to spawn. Again, as many players as possible must go and stand on one fissure each, and every other player who is not on a fissure should try and stand on the sides in order to avoid the green fire lines because that is really going to be one of the main source of damage in this battle. It is very important that only the players standing on a fissure take that, and that those players make sure to heal themselves and remove their debuff as soon as he spawns the healing runes next, because otherwise your raid will just simply not have the DPS to go through this fight. Now again, he is going to spawn the healing mana stones right after the fissure phase, which is very important as because that is when you're going to have taken the most amount of damage. So again, your group must go and pick up those stones, even if they are in an awkward position. Everyone should stand in those and cleanse their debuff. One other mechanic to take a note here is going to be poison rains that he spawns randomly around the map. They are just basically green dots coming from the sky and doing some damage over time and applying the stack of poison. It is obviously very hard to see, but if you are standing underneath it, you can see by taking the red damage on top of your name. Obviously, all you have to do is move out of them. They're very hard to predict and very hard to see, but if you can, you must get out of there. Otherwise, you will take a lot of damage for no reason. So again, the rest of this fight is basically just rinse and repeat. He will then go back to his place where he's attacking and doing AoE in front of him, and then everybody will pick up the DPS stone when they can, and then you wait until the next knockback where he is going to spawn more fissures, as well as give a lot of these green lines that go everywhere around. Now you can see here, we also got knockback. He's spawning a lot of fissures. For your information, there are more fissures every time he does this, so it gets harder and harder. Of course, like me, I'm so far away from any fissures, and the one closest to me is already occupied, so I'm just going to stand here and do DPS. But everyone should go to the nearest fissure and make sure that it is still on before doing any damage, because it is just too important. If you miss too many fissures, you will wipe instantly. There is also going to be the green lines as always, and those get harder and faster because they are just moving more fast than they were before. So it is also very important that you avoid them if you can, by standing basically on the edges if you're not a fissure. And then he will spawn the healing mana stones, which will heal you from all the damage you took in that phase. And then more DPS stones, and then that's basically the fight. It's just rinse and repeat. The most important thing in this fight is really that you must stand on the fissures. You cannot let anyone not stand on a fissure because it will really do a lot of damage, and you must heal yourself on the runes to remove your debuffs and to re-heal the damage that you took, because you will be taking damage no matter what. Afterwards, it is just about burning him. Once you've burned him, he dies. As long as you've done it before 8 minutes, you will not have the enrage timer, and then the fight is over. As simple as that. There is obviously a lot of mechanics in this fight, and there is going to be a lot of people taking damage, but it is just about avoiding damage as much as possible in order to do well. Again, melee units in this fight do much better than others, so if you have strong players with a lot of cav units like we have here, it has really helped our damage a lot, of course. As you can see here, the rewards are pretty good. You get these rewards once for every elite fight that you do, and of course, because we were the first on our server to beat this before 6:30 minutes, we got a special frame that we can then equip, which is obviously a server first and can only happen once per server. So that's it for the HYDRA fight. Of course, if you have any question, make sure to ask in the comments. I'm happy to help you. And I have guides for all of the other Behemoth elite fights as well. So if you're interested, make sure to check out the channel and subscribe for the upcoming fights, as I am going to make a guide every time we beat one of these. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.